This is Advisorpedia's Power Your Advice podcast, and I'm Doug Heikkinen. We're at the Steward Partners Annual Symposium in Orlando, and we're here with the CEO himself, Jim Gold. Thank you for having us back.
Now we're thrilled to have you here again. Thank you.
Let's go back for a minute. Where did you start your career? What's your path to Steward Partners? And how did you find a way to harness all the energy you have and give it away to others?
You know, it's amazing to say I will be 30 years in the business on July 11th this summer. So 7/11/1995, I started at Smith Barney as a trainee out in Jericho, Long Island, and came up through the training program there. They had a fantastic training program. Ultimately, I went into branch management in 1999 and spent a lot of my time in training. So I started out as a training officer myself, which was kind of fun to go back to the place I was trained. And now 3.5 years later, I'm standing in front of the room teaching the new folks. Went on to have numerous roles in field management. And I think that was one of the many things Smith Barney did right, which was that the branch system was led by people who had done the job. So when an advisor walked in and said, "Hey, buddy, come on, can you help me out here? I got this big client. They got the IRA fee." And I'm like, "Just give me, I'll sign the form. You don't need to sell me on why do you need me to waive that fee." So it really changed how the culture ran and how the advisors felt supported. Then ultimately was part of the Morgan Stanley takeover. And look, it was a time in the industry where the larger firms, I think, turned the hourglass upside down. So the hourglass used to be the client was number one, the advisor was number two because they served the client, and the firm was the least important in that relationship. Everything became about the shareholder, the firm, and the culture just changed. And we saw the opportunity between the flight to independence and this sort of cultural meltdown to say you could build a firm that gives people the tools and resources they wanted and the culture they used to have.
So you've experienced exponential growth since founding this in 2013. What are some of the key inflection points or decisions that enabled such a rapid expansion in a relatively short period of time?
Yeah, it's a ferocious need to do more in a good way. So listen, the whole thing is very much like being a trainee. It's very Darwinian. Your first thought is, how do we survive? How do I get to critical mass? How do we get enough here that we're going to get the plane to take off before we run out of runway here? Which was probably the first 3 years, looking back on it. So you get to critical mass. There were numerous really important checkpoints. I mean, I remember feeling like King Kong at the top of the Empire State Building. We had $1 billion in assets. Now we bring in $1 billion, every 2 months. So amazing to see that. But I think back to 2016, launching our own RIA. We're now the 18th RIA ranked by Barron's in the world. We picked up a broker-dealer a few years later. So really putting in these formative pieces that allowed the steward of today to exist. Without those formative structural changes, we would look different than we do today.
So you offer a W-2 affiliation model for advisors and have moved to a multi-custodian platform. How do these unique model offerings differentiate Steward from other firms in the independent wealth management space?
I don't know of another firm that has 4 custodial options. And I think what it allows us to do is to be truly agnostic. So we don't have any preference of where you go. We really say, hey, these custodians are RIA only. These custodians are different. What's important to you? What are the things you like about how your business runs today? I think if we look at the M&A opportunity in the industry, the more custodians you have, the least disruptive you can be to a person who's thinking about monetizing their practice, which is critically important, right? They don't want to have to put their clients through a move just so they can sell and monetize. And listen, for us, it just accelerates our growth even further.
So you have a huge, ambitious goal of $1 billion in revenue and $100 billion in assets. So what strategies are you deploying to achieve this, and how do you maintain the momentum to keep moving forward?
Yes, it's amazing to say that, usually a company, as the company matures, you see the growth decelerate, right? Because it's hard to keep matching that. We actually had a record 23, a record 24. We're already 50% above last year in inorganic growth through recruiting and M&A. And we're really starting to focus more and more on organic growth, right? We have top producers that are growing dramatically, and they have a relentless thirst for more resources and tools that we want to help them with. And when I say to people, they say, "Well, Jim, why didn't you guys focus on this earlier?" And I say, you have to understand, when you're doing $40 million in revenue, if we could get everyone to grow by 5%, that's $2 million in revenue. or we can go recruit $30 million in revenue and grow the firm faster. So at that time, inorganic growth was the number one growth path for us. It's now evolved into W-2 recruiting, M&A, which is a really important topic. And then now organic growth by supporting our advisors with great tools and technology.
So your equity ownership structure is often cited as the cornerstone of your culture. Can you explain how this model works and why it's so integral to your success?
It is integral. I would tell you, it's funny, and our folks here would tell you the same thing, is that in a opening conversation with someone, it's actually an impediment. Because everyone here, they remember the horror stories, and I came out of X firm and my shares went from X to, X minus 100% or whatever the number was. And it's really an educational process. And then once they're here, they go, wow, I should have taken more equity in my deal. I really didn't appreciate the value of the equity. So what we wanted to do from the very beginning was say, we want a true partnership, right? So as the co-founder and CEO of the firm, I have zero financial benefit over anyone else at this firm. So whatever your role is, you and I have the same financial opportunity here. So it is truly an equity partnership. We saw the day, which we've now hit, which is our advisors and their teams own half this company. So they are the largest single shareholder block at the company. And that's the way it should be. They are the revenue source of this company. So it really is about saying, let's all do well together. We're all going to make money together. We're all going to build wealth together, but it has to be shared, right? This is not an us and them. This is not Animal Farm. We are all truly partners here.
So Steward Partners has attracted significant outside investments from Sinosure and the Pritzker organization. How has this capital infusion influenced your growth strategy and ability to pursue some more M&A opportunities?
What it does is, I think it's a couple of things. One is, our competitors like to sell against our equity, and they say, the equity has no value and it's worthless and don't listen to these guys. So one is, I think it's critical to validate that value. So when someone comes in and says, here's some money at this valuation of the firm, in both those cases, Doug, we should let people know that we not only took in capital, we took half that capital and let our partners tender shares, literally down to the penny at what the firm received. So it's great to have equity in a privately held company. It's great when it goes up in value, but nirvana is, if you want to, you can take some chips off the table. We have advisors in both those cases that 40% of our folks did not sell any shares. So Sinosure came in 2019, and just to give you a sense of our growth, it was 6 years ago next week. We were sub $9 billion in assets, right? We're now about 41. We were the largest deal they'd ever done. We were the only firm of a type like ours they ever invested in. And then 2 years later, the Pritzker organization came in, which is Tom Pritzker's family office. Tom is the chairman of Hyatt Hotels. And they had spoken to 104 companies before us and invested in zero. So we were the first firm they invested in. It was $100 million. And they came in at multiples of Sinosure's valuation in just 2 years. So what they brought to us is a whole new world of experience and knowledge and wisdom. They have extensive backgrounds. Keith Taylor used to run the FIG group at Carlyle. And even today, we're talking to them at the conference about one of their other investments that we're working with them on some services we can provide our advisors here. So it opens up the door of next level resources, next level capital and wisdom.
You're known for a leadership style described as fun, fair, but firm, and maybe sometimes flexible. How do you foster a culture that balances accountability, collaboration, and innovation across such a fast-growing organization?
It's funny. We had our shareholder meeting yesterday, and at the end of it, I was talking about a topic, and someone shouted out from the crowd. They said, "Jimmy, we trust you, pal." And that to me is something you can lose trust overnight, right? So we really look at every single decision we make and say, is this reflective of who we are? And make sure who we're supposed to be. So advisors are reasonable people, right? They want help, they want assistance, they want to do more. And they have no problem with the answer no if it doesn't make sense. But no one ever gives them the respect to explain why the answer has to be no sometimes. And more importantly, to say, hey, Doug, you can't have a skywriter fly over your office, say, invest with Doug, you'll never lose money. But we can build you a custom website. You can do a podcast. So it's really helping them understand we can get you to where you're telling me you want to get to, but here's how we have to do that together. So the fair and flexible is really saying, look, if there's a reasonable request, we're going to do what you need us to do. But listen, my father used to say common sense is not that common. We try to run the firm with a common sense approach, which I think people find refreshing in wealth management.
It's great. We hang on to those things from our fathers.
Yeah.
With the industry facing a crisis in succession and the aging of advisors, how is Steward preparing for the next generation of talent and leadership within the firm?
Yeah. No, that's another great topic. So if you look at the stats in the industry, about 2/3 of all assets are held by advisors over 55. There are fewer advisors under 40 than over 70 in the industry, right? And you look at the number that 65% of the assets projected that 50% of those advisors will be retired in 10 years, 75% in 15 years, right? That's a blink of an eye. I mean, Steward's now a 12-year-old company. So almost in the time that Steward's existed, 75% of advisors are going to retire. So you have to have a next-gen solution. And we built this M&A chassis. We acquired a company called Freedom Street, and more importantly, acquired a leadership team of Freedom Street. Their average advisor is under 45 years old. Our average advisor at Steward's under 52, so we're younger than the industry. But there's a whole cadre of opportunity where you say, listen, at Steward, you can come in here and say, hey, I'm 65 years old. Shame on me. I haven't planned for succession. I want to move to Steward, and it's a great home for my clients. I need your help in figuring out my legacy, which is why we call it the legacy channel. And maybe they're here for 2 years, right? And there's a nice, slow, warm handoff there. The other ones we're seeing is, we sort of call it sell and exit and sell and stay. So sell and stay, we have a very significant team here for their first conference. They joined us 6 months ago. You have 3 advisors over 60 and 3 advisors under 40. What they lacked is the capital and resources to have that cohesive transition of the economics. The senior partners want to retire in about 5 years. They already have their second generation behind them. By the time the senior folks retire, we'll have another generation behind the current G2. But then I think it's also being thoughtful around the G1, or these are the hunters, right? G2 is probably the farmers. They have a different need. They have a different skill set. They have different, resources they should have in front of them. And that's where things like having model portfolios and things they can access is they say, hey, I don't want to run money. I don't want to read research reports. I want to take care of my clients. I want to do a great job for them. I want to analyze their financial plan. So it's just really having a toolkit that can address that disparate need that they have.
In an industry where many firms put themselves first, you said that at Steward, the client comes first, the advisor second, and the firm last. How does this philosophy manifest in day-to-day operations and decision-making?
I think it comes back to what is the client experience going to be, right? What are our clients looking for? And that really comes from our advisors, right? And they drive that process. We have over 14 committees at the firm founded by our advisors. So there's a growth committee, there's a marketing committee, there's a technology committee, there's a platform committee, and they help us get better. And they help the firm get better by really saying, lots of my clients are asking for this and lots of my clients are asking for that. And then in that room, it'll ultimately turn to, hey, we should check out these 2 or 3 tools that are out there. We heard these could actually address that need for our clients.
All right, last one for you. And looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for Steward Partners and for the independent advisory space more broadly in the next 5 years?
I think our biggest focus is culture, right? And when you grow and grow, there's a natural concern over how do you keep a great culture, right? And in this event that we're at is really part of that. I was talking to someone yesterday, one of our asset management sponsors. They said, I've never seen a CEO get hugged so much in my life. And so, it was funny. We had our Steward session yesterday and the topic came up about culture. And I think the interesting bifurcation there, it wasn't, hey, we need to fix our culture. It was, we all love this culture. How do we protect it? And I said, the fact that we're talking about it is why I know it won't change. So I think that's a real focus of our board of directors as well, is every meeting. And our board, by the way, sits in on many of the committees I mentioned, the advisor council, the administrative council. There's a board of director representative who sits in the board with us in those councils. So they're hearing directly from the field. So culture is critical to us and who we are, and we can never lose that. We are, super excited about our growth. I said, we're going to have a record year. We have over $50 million in commitments and $6 billion in assets coming in the next 100 days. So we don't actually look at the billion revenue as a lofty goal anymore. We're looking into 2 billion and maybe 2.5 is on the horizon somewhere.
You've really built something fantastic here. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks again for being here.
To learn more about Steward Partners, please visit stewardpartners.com. We are on all social media platforms at Advisorpedia. Please give us a follow. For our producer, Tori Miller, and everyone at Advisorpedia, thank you for listening.